A logo is displayed, depicting six blind cane-holding figures, arranged in a pinwheel pattern in the colors of orange, blue, and green. They sit atop the words, National Federation of the Blind of Nebraska. Live the life you want.
I want to introduce to you now our luncheon keynote speaker. Some of you will remember her because she did spend some years here in Nebraska, so we claim her still. You know, people come to Nebraska and they're always Nebraskans in our hearts anyway, even after they leave. And I was so excited that she agreed to speak with us today and share her remarks. She has an incredible story, her blindness journey, kind of putting all the pieces of living life to the fullest. She can talk about all three of these things that we're touching on today. Of course, living, working, and she does some stuff for fun too. Some of you might have even attended her salsa dance classes if you've been at National Convention. And anyway, without further ado, I don't want to cut into her time. It is my pleasure to welcome to you all the way from Washington, D.C., Conchita Hernandez.
Thank you, Amy. I absolutely claim Maryland as my NFB home because that's really where I found the NFB. And so you all claim me and I claim you as well. So thank you for that introduction. I'm just going to set my timer real quick so I don't forget. Okay, perfect. So thank you all so much. I'm actually joining you all from the convention in Maryland. We are having our NFB convention right now, so I snuck away to come join you all. So we're kind of, you know, dueling, having different NFB events, which is really, really great. As I was going through the agenda, I was reading the quote that's actually kind of ahead of my section, which says, don't limit yourself. Many people limit themselves to what they think they can do. You can go as far as your mind lets you when you believe you can achieve, by Mary Kay Ash. And there's always a story that I tell specifically to parents between the bees and the fleas, right? This idea that you really can do as much as you think you can do, but if what you think you can do is limited, then you're not going to be able to do that much. And so fleas, we'll start off with the fleas. So fleas, for example, they train them for like little circuses. And the way they train them is they put them in this big bucket and they close the lid on top. So the fleas jump and they touch the lid, and it keeps kind of limiting how far they can jump so that they internalize that that's as far as they can jump. So after some time, you can take away the lid, and those fleas will never jump higher than that point where the lid was at. They don't recognize that the lid is gone. They just know that's as high as I can ever jump. Whereas bees, on the other hand, scientists have no idea how they fly because their body mass is actually really heavy for their wings. Like aerodynamically, they just don't know how they're flying, but bees don't know that, and bees fly, whether it's kind of understood by science or not. And so I think when I talk to parents, I really tell them, and educators, you know, we need to treat our students, especially our blind students, like bees and not like fleas. And sometimes we limit what they can do. And I'm like, I'm not really sure how a student's going to do this. Should I tell them not to? And I let them, and they surprise me, even things that I wasn't sure how they were going to do, because kids are really, really creative. So part of this idea of being able to, like Amy said, you know, live, work, play, I think what ties it all together is being able to be fully yourself. And being able to be fully true to who you are. And no one else can do that for you. You know, we have all these seminars and information and like, rah, let's do this. But if you don't want to do those things, no one's going to make you do them. And you have to find out what it is that being truly yourself is. You have to be kind of at peace with yourself and confident with all aspects of who you are, and that includes blindness. Blindness is a journey. We never really arrive. Like, there's not somebody that I'm like, oh, they're there, they're good. they've made it, because it's a journey. We're always learning new things. We're always, having a new barrier that we have to overcome. So like anything, for me, it was a journey as well. So I actually came to the United States when I was 5 years old with my family from Mexico. So I didn't speak English. I didn't know the culture, anything like that. And so adding blindness on top of that, it definitely made it a little bit complicated. Both my brother and I are blind, and we had to figure out how to navigate the school system. And if I've learned anything, it's that it seems like you really need an advanced degree to really be able to navigate the school system and learn IEPs and parent rights and student rights and how to really advocate for what it is that you need. And I think that one way that we really fail our kids is we treat school as just a service, when in reality, school is a way to transform the lives of our students. If we can provide our blind and low vision students with the adequate supports and services and accommodations, then their life can really be transformed into one that's meaningful and not limited to people's misconceptions about blindness, because those abound everywhere. So when I was going through school, I do have what they considered, quite a bit of vision. And so I didn't receive the supports I needed because they told me, oh, you can see so much. So because of that, I was never taught Braille. I had good grades. And so there was this idea that, well, if you have good grades, you're not really struggling and you're doing fine. And so many of our students find themselves in the same situation. And so because I didn't receive the correct services and supports, I had a lot of anxiety. So I would worry about, like, am I going to find my class today? Because I didn't have O&M skills because it was determined I could see too much. And I had anxiety that I was going to go to class and my teacher was going to do an activity that I wasn't going to be able to participate in, and that I was going to get called out as like, oh yeah, you can't see, so maybe don't participate in this. So it's this constant anxiety and worrying about, I'm going to show up somewhere, it's not going to be what I need in order to thrive in that space. And a lot of these things are easy fixes, like they're easy fixes, but I didn't have the tools to what those easy fixes were. I didn't know how to navigate on my own. I didn't know how to, read Braille. I didn't know that I could get books electronically. And so, yes, I had good grades and I figured it out, but I really struggled my way through. Like all through college, I ended up reading like tiny little print and would get headaches and would get really tired, because it was never explained to me that like you can actually get electronic books and you can actually do these things. When I was in college, I actually showed up at the disability office thinking they were going to help me. And I was like, oh, so I can't really see that well. And, I don't see steps. And that was a big thing that like, I don't do steps. And I went to this gorgeous college in California called St. Mary's in Moraga. And it's like colonial style, like really, really beautiful with steps everywhere. And they were like, well, we have a solution. We think we can just like paint all of the steps, a bright yellow across campus. And I was like, okay, I can't think of anything else that could possibly solve this issue for me. And so my whole college campus was like this, it was like this gorgeous campus with like ugly, bright orange lines everywhere. And I was like, that's because of me, like I was very proud of my little bright yellow lines. And so I didn't really have the support or like the understanding of there's something better. Like I shouldn't have to paint yellow lines everywhere I go, because I didn't know how to get around. So my senior year in college, I actually had a blind professor, and I, at the beginning of every semester, I would go up to my professors and tell them, hey, I can't really see, so make sure you're speaking what you're saying on the board, and just little things that I kind of was asking them to do. And he was like, oh, so you're blind? And I'm like, no, take a step back. I'm not like those people. I'm like legally blind, like, like the movie, except instead of blonde, I'm blind. And so he was like, okay. And so he started talking to me about this convention, and he was like, there's this convention of blind people and you should really go. Like, I think you'd be a really good fit. And I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. So I kind of blew him off. And every time he'd see me, he'd be like, have you contacted them? And I was like, no, I haven't. Because in my mind, like blind people were different than me, right? Like I was always told my whole life, like, oh, you're so lucky that you have some vision and you're not totally blind, like those people who are, fumbling and not knowing what they're doing. So, so finally one day he was like, you're coming to my office and we're going to figure this out now. And I was like, oh gosh, I guess I have to go. So he took me to his office and he called up the NFB in California, who didn't know me. I didn't know they existed. I didn't know it was a thing. And he was like, I have this young girl here who, you know, is a leader, and you guys, like, she needs your support, and blah blah blah. And the funny thing is, he wasn't super involved in the NFB. He was like a blind person, but he knew about them. And for him, it was just like he was doing other things, but he was like, this is something you need to do. And so he was like, you all are going to pay for her way to go to your national convention. You're going to pay for her hotel and her meals, and she's going to go. And I was sitting there like, they're going to tell him like, you're ridiculous. Of course we're not doing this. And somehow they were just like, okay, yeah, sounds good. We'll do that. And I was sitting there and I was like, I guess I have to go now. I have no excuse because these people that I don't even know are paying my way. And so I was like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? So I ended up going to convention, and for the people that knew me kind of before the NFB, like, you know, people run into me, they're like, oh, you must have done this forever. Like, no, I was a totally different person before. So when I would go to the airport, I didn't know how to navigate an airport because I didn't know how to navigate anywhere. Like, I never really went anywhere by myself. I would always go with somebody. And so when I would show up at the airport, I would pretend I was totally blind. And it was like all of the stereotypes that I ever learned along the way, like I played out at the airport. So I would like wear glasses and have my cane and, you know, use human guide and just do all the obnoxious things that so that I could get help, because I didn't understand how I could possibly navigate an airport on my own or get help unless I told them I was totally blind. So I show up to the convention, and like I mentioned earlier, I was always told, you know, you're so lucky because you're not totally blind. And I really believed it. I thought that I was like so lucky because I wasn't like those totally blind people. And, you know, I was really taught to pity totally blind people, which I think a lot of us are. And that's where that like internalized ableism comes from. So if there are, you know, people that become blind, it becomes so devastating because we've internalized all of their ideas. So when I showed up to convention, it was my very first introduction ever to the National Federation of the Blind. And I was like, all of these people who I, in my mind, thought, you know, I was so much better than, when I really wasn't doing anything on my own, they were just living their lives. They were navigating the hotel. They were, you know, reading their menus. They were doing all of these things and like really being true to themselves. And I just remember being in shock of like everything that I know that I thought was kind of totally shifted. And so I met a lot of people. It really transformed kind of my way of thinking about things slowly and surely. And I had my first O&M lesson at that convention. And my friend was like, okay, like do you think you're ready to go buy a cane? And I was like, maybe. And so I went, you know, to go buy a cane, and he was trying to convince me to use a straight cane. And I was like, no, absolutely not. Like, I'm getting a folding cane. And he was like, are you trying to get a straight cane because you're trying to hide your blindness? And I was like, absolutely, 100%. I'm not going to go out in public with this cane. Like, that's just not something I'm going to do. So I'm absolutely trying to hide my blindness. And so I ended up getting a folding cane, much to my friends, like, you know, resistance. And at that moment, I wasn't ready yet. I wasn't ready because I had just been introduced. I wasn't ready for it. And that's okay. I think wherever every person is at on this journey of like accepting yourself as a blind person and being okay with it, I think is a journey that we're all a part of. And so at that point, like a seed was planted. And at the convention, I met amazing people. One of the people I met was Carlos Servan, who is the director there in Nebraska. And he really kind of talked to me about all of these things. And, you know, from somebody else that was also Spanish speaking, that could relate to, you know, Latin culture in a way that other people couldn't, because there's different barriers and different stigmas that exist. And so at that point, I realized I need to get training. Like, I don't know how to do stuff. I don't know how to walk on my own, go anywhere by myself. And so that's how I ended up coming to Nebraska. And so I went to training, and a lot of people that are there in person today are people that were my instructors. I saw Jeff on the agenda, who, you know, taught me O&M, and finally showed me how I could go downstairs. And so going to training was one of the things that really transformed my life, because I learned so much about myself, and what I could do as a blind person. And it was really the first time that I called myself a blind person, because I was very much like, no, I'm not like those people. So I started using a cane. I learned how to cook non-visually. I learned, how to do all these things that I just didn't do before. But overall, I think I learned to get rid of those negative ideas about blindness, and that blindness didn't have to be this, negative thing, and that it was okay, and that not only was it okay, but it was something that you could be proud of. And I always make the connection with like being Mexican, right? Like I'm very proud of being Mexican, and all of that comes with it. And society isn't necessarily always on the same path. Like there's definitely negative things out there, but I still know that even though society has those negative ideas, I'm still proud of it myself. And so I learned to kind of take that mentality and apply it to blindness, and how there's always going to be people out there that have these bad misconceptions about blindness and what it is. But I knew myself that that it didn't have to be anything negative. So anybody that's gone through really good training knows that it's very difficult to do. It's not easy. If it was easy, then everybody would do it, and that would just be the end of it. And I think it's so difficult, not necessarily because the skills are hard, because they're not. Like I could teach someone how to cook non-visually. It's not that big of a deal. I could teach somebody the alphabet in a week. It's not that big of a deal. But the hardest thing about going through training is really changing our mindset about who we are, and blindness being okay, and us. Ultimately, it comes down to us being okay with ourselves. And I think that's what's most important. So at that point, I was in Nebraska full time. I started attending the NFB meetings there. And like I was saying earlier, I always say Nebraska is my NFB home, because it's really the first place that I started attending meetings. I went through training, and I attended chapter meetings and stuff. So after training there in Nebraska, I realized I didn't get the support and services I needed in school. I didn't learn Braille. I didn't, learn how to advocate for myself or ask for accommodations. And I realized what a disservice the school had done to me. And so I wanted to become a teacher of blind students. So I went to the Louisiana Tech program, and became a teacher of blind students. And I was a TDI for a long time in public schools. And now, recently, but I guess not that recently, it's been like 4 years now, I'm working in Maryland as the Maryland Blind and Low Vision Specialist. So I oversee the education of blind students in Maryland, making sure services are adequate, providing professional development to TVIs, kind of whatever is involved. And I'm actually really, really excited. Kind of the big thing I've been working on recently is we just partnered at the Department of Education in Maryland with the National Federation of the Blind. And so we are providing 15 full ride scholarships for people to become TVIs in Maryland and teach. And it's something that I'm super, super excited about, that, it's kind of like part of my journey that's kind of brought me to where I am. And so if you know anyone that wants to move to Maryland and wants to be, 100% paid their tuition to become a TVI, you have to have a teaching certificate is the thing. So they have to already be teachers. But if they're interested, have them reach out. So what Amy was kind of talking about earlier, kind of like working and playing and stuff. So I'm involved in kind of different things. So I've recently joined Achilles, and I'm not sure if there's one in Nebraska, but I'm sure there is. They're all over the place. And so I've been doing a lot of running with them, and I ran like a race in Central Park not too long ago. I did come up with a technique because I love to dance. It's kind of a big part of who I am. And I realized like there really wasn't a good technique for teaching blind people how to dance, because it's always like move like this, do that, and it's really visual. So I came up with a way to teach blind people how to dance using the Braille cell. And it's really, really easy. And you don't have to know Braille to learn it. It takes like 5 seconds. And it incorporates this idea that like Braille doesn't have to be hard, and blind people can dance and kind of do what they want. So I think the biggest gift, in my opinion, that we have in the NFB, because there are all of these things, is really the gift of people. Um, the wealth of knowledge that exists in the organization, I think, is really the biggest gift. So if wherever you find yourself on this path of kind of blindness, right? Look for mentors, look for people who have similar experiences to yourself, look for people who are doing what you want to do. Because everybody has a story, everybody has what they've learned along the way, their techniques that they learned to do that. And in the NFB, people are more than willing to share their experiences with you, because I think we all gained so much from this organization that we're so happy to give back to other people, so that they can also kind of become their true selves within blindness. So no one can tell you what it is that you need to do in order to do that. Only you can answer that question of what it is that you need to do, what training you need, what support you need in order to be on your path of blindness and figure out what to do. However, definitely use the NFB as a resource, find out how others did what they did. Because if you're really not going to be your true self in all of blindness and everything else that is a part of you, then what's really the point, right? If you're going to live with anxiety, and if you're going to live, with like a fear of doing things, or not being able to express who you are, not being fully 100% okay with who you are, then it's going to be a really difficult path. So thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited, and like I said, Nebraska is my NFB home, so I'm happy to come and talk to you guys, and see all the great work you all continue to do.
The preceding presentation was brought to you by the National Federation of the Blind of Nebraska. Live the